Welcome to Novelist Spotlight. This is Mike Consol, your host. Before we begin this episode, I want to alert you that my latest book is now available in both print and ebook formats. The title is Love American Style, and it is a collection of short stories about men, women, their passions, and their dysfunctions. There's a short link in the episode notes that will take you to my Amazon profile page, where all 4 of my books are listed, 3 novels in this new short story collection. Again, the title of the new one is Love American Style, named after the TV series that ran from 1969 until 1974. Now, on with our program. In the spotlight is Chad Boudreaux. He's former Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Officer of the nation's largest military shipbuilder and former Deputy Chief of Staff for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, where he advised the Department Secretary Michael Chertoff. We used to see Michael Chertoff on TV all the time during the George W. Bush administration. And he consulted with Michael Chertoff on almost all significant matters facing the newly established department. And Chad Boudreaux is on the program, of course, because he is currently a novelist. His career in government led him to write novels with titles such as Scavenger Hunt and Homecoming Queen. Scavenger Hunt warns us that when justice is blind, scavengers do the hunting. And Homecoming Queen, a small town political thriller, advises us that no one ever leaves Miranda twice. Miranda being Miranda, Texas. Chad Boudreaux, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me. Pleasure.
Pleasure to have you. And how interesting that you spent time at Homeland Security. We'll get into that in a minute, but I want to kind of go through your progression here a little bit. In 1998, you graduated from law school, passed the Texas bar exam, became a trial lawyer in Austin, Texas. And during your time in Austin, you defended doctors and companies in various jury and bench trials. To begin with, did you study law with the intent of becoming a trial lawyer, or did you figure that out along the way?
I think I had to become a trial lawyer because I could not be confined to my desk, and my personality is such that I have to be kind of engaged and with people and in the theater. And so I think for law students, we kind of have to decide early on whether we're going to be contracts lawyers or litigators. It's a little bit more complicated than that. Those are really the 2 categories that you pursue, and I definitely have the trial lawyer gene.
You like an audience. You like to present a case live, not just on paper. And what else? I mean, is that accurate? And what else would you add to that?
I think that's true. I think when we were going through COVID, we all kind of figured out how well we did confined to our homes. And I wasn't one that did very well with that. I had a good time with it for the first couple of weeks. And then after that, I realized that my personality was such, my whatever I have in terms of good things about me, they usually show up and when I'm interacting with other people. And so that's my strength. And so my strength is blunted when I'm not around people. So I think I would just add that.
Now, you chose to be a trial lawyer defending doctors and companies. Now, some people see them as the bad guys. Others don't. Others see them as defending themselves against people making a lot of frivolous or fraudulent claims. Why did you decide to go on the defense here, protecting doctors and companies, versus the common man who sometimes is wronged, like, for instance, a defective product or a pharmaceutical that doesn't do what it's supposed to do, or so on?
Yeah, I don't really think it's an either or. We highlight the defense space because most of us, when we come out, we do have to choose whether we're going to go work in the government and whether we're going to work for a plaintiff's firm or a defense firm. I got to tell you, for me, I mean, just getting a job in Austin, Texas was hard enough. And I was very happy with my employment, but it was one of those where I didn't really get to choose my clients. I will tell you, though, that at least in Austin, Texas, there is a great respect for doctors there. And So they were actually good clients to have because you kind of went in with the benefit of the jury. Now there are other clients I can tell you that are very hard to represent, nursing homes being one of them. There are a lot of great people who do a lot of great things in nursing homes, including my former mother, who was amazing at what she did in nursing homes. But those are really hard cases to try. They come across as very unfair to some people, and so there's some harder than others. But I will say, just to close this out, though, the best case that I ever had was working in a law firm and doing it was pro bono work for a woman who was a deaf mute who had lost her son to a murder over Halloween, and the police had stopped trying to find the killer. And we spent about 3 months after that yearly anniversary working with the police to get them re-energized. And eventually we did find the killer, and she had her day in court.
Wow, that's a great story. And again, I would just emphasize good guys, bad guys on both sides. I'm not by no means taking either side, but that's a terrific story that you just told, bringing somebody to justice for murder. You were then hired by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security the night before 9/11, so right into the fire. To begin with, how did you get hired by Homeland Security? Were you pursuing a job there? Did you get a call from somebody saying we could use you here?
Yeah, I just want to be clear for the people, the Washingtonians who will know that my job at DOJ was different than my job at Homeland Security. I started off at DOJ, which you referenced, hired the night before the September 11 attacks. And as it relates to that job, I was in Austin. I knew some people that were working there in Austin that flighted up to DC. And I told them when I was interviewing, back in 2001, before 9/11, that they didn't have any 3-year lawyers that had as much trial experience as I did. They had a lot of people who'd worked on the Supreme Court, had a lot of people with some, big degrees from some great law schools, but they didn't really have anybody with my experience because I'd gotten so much experience in court at an early age with the law firm in Austin. So that was my pitch, and it turned out. It took me 9 months, but it turned out to work.
So just to fill out your bio a little bit more, the year was 2003. You received the Justice Department's Special Commendation for Outstanding Service for your work at the Justice Department's Terrorism Litigation Task Force, where you handled a variety of complex, high-profile cases filed against the United States. And jumping ahead to 2005, you were appointed Deputy Chief of Staff of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, where you worked directly with Secretary Michael Chertoff. I mentioned that earlier.
Yep.
2006 comes along, and you join the international law firm of Baker Botts, LLP in Washington, D.C., where you established the Global Security and Corporate Risk Counseling Practice Group. You advise numerous Fortune 500 companies in all aspects of national and homeland security issues, compliance, matters involving federal law enforcement and litigation. So along the way here, Chad, did you know you wanted to be a writer? Or like, I've known a lot of lawyers over the years, being a journalist my entire professional life. I've known a lot of lawyers who wanted to be writers. They have loved to be reporters. They didn't want to take the pay cut, frankly, but they liked writing a lot. Did you always have the bug for writing?
I always had the bug for writing, but I didn't think that I had the passion for becoming a professional writer. I think that passion found me. It found me while I was at the Department of Justice right after 9/11, and I was immersed in an environment that was, so chaotic and so harrowing at the time that this time period, I remember being in time and place where wherever you found yourself on the political spectrum, you really did think we were going to get hit that day or the following day. It was that acute. And I think just being a part of that atmosphere drove me to write a story, Scavenger Hunt. And once I started writing Scavenger Hunt, I got a lot of support from sharing chapters with people smarter than me and who'd been in the industry, whether it was law enforcement or the intelligence community. And then they became kind of my surrogate champions as I continued to write. And I'd put the book down and they'd say, "You're not allowed to put that book down. You need to keep writing it." And they were a great inspiration to me. And then that is kind of, at that point, I think my passion found me, and I knew that I was going to be able to I knew that I was going to need to do this, for a long time.
Now, yeah, the incident you're referring to just before 9/11, when all the everything was flashing red, is that right? They
Yeah,
knew a terror attack was coming. They just didn't know what it was going to be, but it's like something's coming down.
well, so for me, I mean, it was actually right after 9/11. So we had the 9/11 attacks. And at least where I was, and in the DC area, in the New York City area, there was every day there seemed to be like a new scare. Some were real, others were not, but it was this constant on high alert. You remember we had the color-coded Homeland Security system. We had
Yes.
people getting up seemingly every month or so. I think with good intentions, just we did not have the intelligence community fabric that we even have now with human intelligence. We had some great people down, great human intelligence, signals intelligence, nothing like we have now. And we didn't know what we didn't know. And so it was one of those constantly on alert. I remember being at DOJ like a few months and we had anthrax. There was a scare that we had anthrax in our air conditioning system and just something like that.
You thought it was, I mean, it was not anthrax, right? But it was suspected to be anthrax. Is that right?
It was. And, we
It
showed
was
up.
suspected.
It was suspected. They
Yeah.
did have anthrax at the Senate building. I think it was Dirksen down the road, and I think after that, everybody thought, anytime they saw any kind of white talcum powder, it was anthrax.
And there were people mailing white powder just to
Yeah,
scare people, right?
yeah, they were.
Do you remember, Chad, that old woman who died of anthrax poisoning and the FBI turned every stone it could turn, searched everything, and they couldn't figure out how she came in contact with it. Did they ever figure that? Do you know the woman I'm talking about? Did they ever figure that out?
I seem to recall the incident you're referring to, but I'm not certain how it was resolved.
I'd never heard it was, so I'm kind of assuming. I mean, sometimes these things get resolved, but they're kind of far back in a news section or don't really get reported very thoroughly. And I never did hear the outcome of that. That was a sad case. I mean, she must have been in her 80s, and nobody could figure out how the heck did she come in contact with anthrax. And of course, they looked at everybody who had any kind of contact with her, all her movements. They just couldn't put it together. It was sad. Now, I also want to just mention you worked for America's largest military shipbuilder and provider of professional services. Well, the shipbuilder is Huntington Ingalls Industry. Is that right?
It is, and I still do work for them.
You do. Okay. Are you a full-time employee of the
I am.
organization?
I am.
We don't have much shipbuilding in the United States anymore, from what I read is that we don't really crank out. For instance, if we're going to build an aircraft carrier, huge. I mean, you probably know the tonnage and all that, with the massive amounts of steel and other types of metal. My understanding is we can't actually produce these things nearly as fast as we used to or should be able to when we're trying to boost the Navy, the ship count in the Navy, and so on. Well, China is really cranking along. What's the status of shipbuilding in America, other than Huntington Ingalls Industries obviously is up and running, but what about beyond that?
Yeah, so we do have several shipyards in the country. Huntington Ingalls and General Dynamics are two of the biggest. And we basically create a different portfolio of ships, aircraft carriers. They, over 100,000 tons. We say 100,000 tons of diplomacy, and those are nuclear powered. We also have nuclear powered submarines and destroyers. And so when you think about it, Navy warships is the main one. Coast Guard also has a portfolio of ships. But to answer your question, we're the number one, I think, um, employer in Mississippi. We have a shipyard there. We're, one of the top employers in Virginia. And the workers that we have are amazing. You can't just go to school and become a shipbuilder. We do have apprentice schools, but it's a tough job. The answer is we're building ships. We're not building ships, I think, any slower, other than they're just more complex. And so but to answer your question, we do need more ships. We need a great many more ships if we're going to combat, aggression overseas. And we're pretty bold, following the Navy here to say, one of those aggressors is China, and so we're going to have to keep up with that. Our slogan, our motto, if you will, for our company is it talks about a great many things, but one of the biggest things that we talk about is promoting peace. And a lot of people think about building warships as being bellicose. A lot of us think about it in terms of promoting peace because the more that we have, the more of a deterrent it is to overseas aggression, those that would want to do us and democracy harm. So it's a great
Right.
job and it's a hard job. I really appreciate my colleagues, particularly those that put on hard hats and steel-toe boots and go out there in the toughest weather conditions during COVID, by the way, when everybody else is at home, and to continue to do the hardest job there is out there to protect our democracy.
And you're chief legal officer there.
Yes, I am.
And it's a Fortune 500 publicly traded company. If anybody's looking to diversify their portfolio with some hard metal there. Um, and now China's got a higher ship count than we do. So, that's one of the things that legislators point out that we need to probably play a little bit of catch up. But at the same time, they talk about in this day and age, just as the tank is becoming anachronistic, there are a lot of people are saying, these big ships, big systems floating on the water are really vulnerable to seawater drones, like what the Ukrainians are using to wipe out the Russian military and so on. Obviously, this is an area of fascination to me. This doesn't necessarily have that much to do with the writing, although I'm sure you take from a lot of your experience, like so many other people who have been, like John le Carre did, from his years with MI6, I believe it was, in the British government to write espionage and spy novels. So when somebody approaches you, Chad, and says, what do you do for a living? Well, okay, you work as a chief legal counsel, but I'm also a novelist. How do you describe what you do in terms of being a novelist? What's your kind of elevator pitch there?
Well, I really don't have to have an elevator pitch for that because, I think I have a really cool job. My dream job I had when I was 28, we've already gone over that. But when I talk to people, they mostly want to talk about my novels and even people that I work with. And so that's usually where the conversation begins. And so a lot of people have either seen, my novel, on social media or in the bookstore, or they've read it, and so we talk a lot about the content and character of those books. I'm very very open about, and I know we'll probably get into some of this, but open about my process for writing because both of my jobs, whether it's writing a novel or having a full-time job at a great company that's very demanding, it requires great time discipline. And so it's something I really have to focus on if I want to juggle those things.
Let's talk about that right now. What
Yeah.
is talk about your work regimen in terms of getting writing done?
Yeah, so I would just say that whenever my demands at work are filling my schedule, then there is no writing. So the work at Huntington Ingalls takes precedent over everything, and sometimes we're busier than other times. We're always busy. But beyond that, I try to carve out early mornings for my writing. I try to write every morning or at least 6 days a week. And I'll usually get up anywhere from 4 to 4:30, and when my brain is fresh, and get a cup of coffee, and I will just pop open my laptop. And normally I'll have, something on my mind that I want to write about, and I'll go to work with that. Other times I do a lot of thinking about during my exercise period, which may be that time or a little bit later. And I'll get on the treadmill, and then a lot of ideas will start flowing. And then my goal is just to get something down on paper. Sometimes maybe it's 5 words, sometimes it may be, 5,000 words.
So yes, yeah, you have your really productive days, and then you have your days where it sounds like it's in the incubator, ready to hatch. What about the when you do get up in the morning? you sit down to write, you mentioned I'll have something on my mind. Do you outline your novels? Are you an inveterate outliner, or do you do the organic type method? I guess they call them pantsers, where you're flying by the seat of your pants and see where you end up.
Yes to both. I start I think my regimen is I will start with a title. Actually, I'll get a title and kind of a concept in mind, and then I'll start building out some characters that I think I want to be a part of a story. I'll start to get a semblance of a story. Then I'll start outlining. And I love the idea of, I live in a world of rules. And being a lawyer, you're constantly dealing with rules. And so I love being a part of the novelist world where there really are no rules. But without some type of scaffolding, I get lost. And so my scaffolding is a 50 chapter outline. And, I'll normally, spend a lot of time putting that together. It's, some chapters are more robust than others. Some are blank for a while because I just don't know how I'm going to fill in the story. But I attempt at that scaffolding. And then I will start normally with a prologue and then roll into chapter one and I will start going and I'll go as far as I can. At some point during that process, my characters, they really do kind of take over a little bit, and my story will usually take a turn because it either my characters won't support it or they've gone in a different direction. And that's really where the fun begins. But I go in with good intentions for a full outline that is more scaffolding than a fulsome outline. But then but then it usually takes a turn, probably about chapter 30, and the rest of the outline has to be rewritten.
Because it's taken to some degree taken on a life of its own and kind of broke the scaffolding a little bit. So you need to make adjustments.
Exactly. I mean, I think for those of your listeners who've read Stephen King's On Writing, and I think, well, you want a Stephen King, I think his characters are amazing. His character development is very good, and he has saying where he says his characters take on a life of their own. When I first heard that, I was thinking that's a little too artsy for me, and it obviously all flows from our minds. But then when I wrote Scavenger Hunt, I started seeing my characters doing things that I did not expect them to do to make the story better. And the great news about it is, I mean, the bad news is it's unpredictable. The great news is that for at least for me, every story that I've written, it's only gotten better when my characters take over. So I kind of wait for that. It's a phenomenon that I welcome.
Yeah, yeah, I get it. So I will say that, I talk writing books with some of the guests on the program. The one writing book that everybody seems to have read is On Writing by Stephen King. It's probably the most well-read writing book out there because everybody I seem to talk to about it knows it. Let me ask you this. When you were talking about working for a shipbuilder, it made me think of, well, a shipbuilder probably builds submarines. Submarines make me think of Tom Clancy. Tom Clancy and Submarines makes me think of The Hunt for Red October, which was his breakout work with a major assist from Ronald Reagan, who happened to say something about the book positive, and suddenly everybody wanted to buy it. And obviously built a big career out of that. I bring that up because I'm just wondering how much of what you do professionally, daytime job, is inspires your novels and how much of it finds its way into the novels, obviously without giving away proprietary information or security information.
Right. Well, I will say, my first review of my book of Scavenger Hunt was by Publisher Weekly, and it was great because they said Tom Clancy fans will want more from Boudreaux. And so I really, I kind of grew up reading Tom Clancy novels, including The Hunt for Red October. And I will say that most of the inspiration for my stories, and I think, whether we're talking about Scavenger Hunt or Homecoming Queen or the books to come, they mostly come from my past life in government. And because of the things that I dealt with there were so rich and still alive now in terms of importance, maybe even more so now in terms of importance. And they fascinated me in ways that even my day job now does not. That doesn't mean that one day I won't write a submarine book, obviously with no proprietary information, but I already have like 10 stories in my head, and none of them involve shipbuilding. So I do think that what we do as shipbuilders is fascinating, but I still have, a richness of content that just comes from working at DOJ and DHS and keeping up with my friends in those communities. So that's about as best as I can give you on that answer.
Let's talk about characters. Do you ever find yourself in a situation where you're writing a book and it's like, Michael Chertoff, he's really the kind of personality that fits for this character. Now, it's not Michael Chertoff, but there was aspects to his character that I am pilfering to go ahead and create this character who might be a composite, but largely based on, and I'm using Michael Chertoff because I know that you work closely with him, but you work closely with a lot of people. Do you ever find your characters out there in the real world, whether it's an individual who you're kind of emulating on the page or even composites?
Yes, and I think for the most part, my characters are an amalgamation of different persons that I've run into. I think people who say that they don't borrow from real life persons in their world are just confused or maybe not being truthful. I think that just it is what it is. Actually, it's interesting. My third book that I've just had edited, is called Mob Justice, and it's a book about the mafia. And Michael Chertoff, before he became Homeland Security Secretary, helped bring down the five families in the New York Mafia. And so, no, I never worked with him in that capacity. I've heard a lot of his stories. And then two other mentors of mine were also very instrumental in that. A guy named Jack Miller, a fascinating lawyer who was RFK's Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division. He was actually a Republican that RFK had hired to help him take down the mob because he didn't want the stink of the mob getting and affecting his brother down the street at Pennsylvania Avenue. So he and RFK and Jack Miller ended up becoming really good friends. And Jack Miller represented the Kennedy family for a long time. But I worked with Jack at Baker Botts. He was my office mate next door, and his and he died, while I was working with him, not at the firm, but he was one of the last people. Well, I was right next door to him, like in his final years, and I took a lot of stories from him. And then David Margolis, who was the cleaner at the Justice Department, was my mentor when I was there, and he was a part of the original organized crime strike force, which was one of the mafia crime busters coming out of DOJ. I say all that because some of those characters actually make it into my actual book as references because they are larger than life in some instances. And I don't like to use real people in my book, but particularly if I'm writing about something positive, I have license to do that. And so I do mention them in my latest book.
Interesting. So your genre is political thrillers. Is that what you would identify as your genre?
Yeah, I would say probably spy thrillers, political thrillers, and crime thrillers. I think when you take my body of work, when I think about the stories that I have in my head, it's probably going to be more crime and spy thrillers. But there's definitely I don't bring politics per se into my books in terms of, hey, this is the Democratic platform, this is the Republican platform, or taking sides as it relates to that. But I definitely bring the dynamics of politics into my stories because it does drive behavior in ways that a lot of people don't fully understand. And I like to take people behind the scenes when we're talking about areas that should be apolitical, law enforcement, intelligence community, homeland security, and kind of give them a flavor about how the world works, whether it be in Washington or Moscow or wherever. There's politics that drive behavior everywhere. So when I say political thriller, That's really what I'm talking about.
Let's walk through your books. Your first one was I'm confused on which one was Scavenger Hunt
Scavenger
first
Hunt.
or
Yep. Scavenger Hunt.
okay. So talk about that one. First of all, what spurred it? And then can you talk a little bit of give us kind of a sketch of it without any spoilers?
Yeah, so Scavenger Hunt is about a protagonist named Blake Hudson who comes to the Department of Justice at an early age, somewhat like I did. I'm not Blake Hudson, but that's, the role that he takes is somewhat like my role. And you're talking about a young lawyer who is put into a situation where he has great responsibility in a major institution that affects, everybody's lives. And he finds himself a part of a group of people that is a combination of skill sets from CIA to the Defense Department, other agencies, and their mission is to prevent terrorist attacks from occurring on American soil. And before long, Blake becomes embroiled in a controversy where they are taking illegal action as a part of this group, and he's caught in between a rock and a hard place and has to make hard decisions. And that the book, the inspiration for the book, beyond just being a part of that actual world, which was probably enough, was that I found that there was a hidden eighth floor at the main Justice Building in DC. And for those who have been to DC, you'll know that the main Justice Building is right across the street from the FBI. The FBI is actually a part of DOJ, but they don't like to say that unless they need funding. But for the most part, those buildings are right across the street from one another, 9 blocks from the Capitol on Pennsylvania Avenue, somewhat between the Capitol and the White House. And and in that building is amazing. It's got amazing artwork. It's a neoclassical building built in 1937, but most people have never seen it. So it was really my being awestruck about the building itself, including this hidden eighth floor that not even people at the Justice Department knew existed. And I asked that really got me inspired, and I ended up asking a custodian who was taking out our trash every day if he had the ability to get up to this eighth floor. And he told me it was basically an attic. But when I got up there, I found it used to be the FBI ballistics lab before they built the FBI Hoover building across the street. And there's literally chains hanging down, and it's kind of this fascinating scene of history that nobody knows about. And so I built that hidden eighth floor into the book as really the cornerstone of the intrigue, and just having that as my place where the team met, this clandestine team that is trying to prevent these terrorist attacks from coming. And after that, I knew I had a story after that, and to this day, people ask me about that eighth floor, and it's fascinating to them.
Well, what is how in what sense was it hidden? Was it a seven-story build, actually an eight-story building, but basically everybody operated on seven floors and nobody went up to the eighth floor? Like the
That's
elevator
correct.
wouldn't go up there, and there
So
was not a stairwell. The stairwell was shut up there.
That's exactly right. There is when you go into the main Justice Building, again, a majestic building, marble floors. It's beautiful. You go into any elevator bank, and it only goes up to the seventh floor. And then there is one staircase that is really hidden. It's in right around the media operations room, and it's a very nondiscreet door. And you open that door, and it takes you into the spiraling case, and the spiraling case takes you to the eighth floor. You have to have keys to get up there. And then when you walk up there, it is a full-sized floor. The ceilings are the same size, but they're largely using it for an attic now and storage space.
Wow.
Used to
Now you
Used
you
to be the
mentioned
FBI, used to be the FBI ballistics lab before they built. So there was actually people working up there and doing cool stuff back in the day.
yeah. So, but you were saying there were chains hanging. What those chains have to do with ballistics? Were
Well,
they just suspending the firearm?
no, if you just think about it, I say that it's largely like air conditioning units. It looks like an industrial attic, if that makes any sense. And so there are people that are working on stuff, and It's hanging light bulbs, naked light bulbs hanging down, and just somebody had roped a couple of chains over the hangars there. It's just it's an unkept place that is very industrial, but it does have a semblance of a normal workspace that was back in yesteryear.
So in Scavenger Hunt, the hidden floor is accessed. What is on that floor and how is it accessed?
So it's accessed the same way that you would get to it now. So it's funny because I actually had a former deputy attorney general, so number two person at the department, read my book and wanted to take me to the building. And he walked me through the building. He wanted to find all the hidden treasures that I put in my book, almost like a scavenger hunt, really. And and he found that staircase, and we went upstairs and we couldn't get in. So we have to go back because we both were locked out. But but it is the same staircase that you would use. And in the book, they have built a skiff, which is uh, basically
Secret room,
yeah,
soundproof room,
that's exactly right.
impenetrable. Yeah, right where you're supposed to look at secret documents and all, uh, and to leave them there. And you can't bring in um, any kind of electronic, no phones, cameras, nothing. Yeah, I
Exactly
once
right.
asked somebody who is involved in that. I said, "What about Google Glasses?" And he said, "That's a good question. I don't, I don't know." But he wasn't actually working for the federal government. He was a contractor. So I'm sure the federal government can explain, yeah, we look out for, Google Glasses or what have you. Um, so your protagonist's name again is
Hudson.
Blake Hudson. Is he in Homecoming as well?
No, he's not. So Homecoming
Okay, so
Queen
you're
is a
not doing a
standalone.
series of Jack Ryan novels or some such thing.
Well, so Scavenger Hunt is going to be a series. The response to Scavenger, my idea from the very beginning was to write just standalone stories, and the response from those who have read Scavenger Hunt was so overwhelming that they wanted more. They wanted more Scavenger Hunt.
Mm.
That I've found a way that, really the characters out of Scavenger Hunt can help me with all of my stories. And so we're going back to Scavenger Hunt for book three. And again, it's finished. It'll be published next year. And
What's the title?
tentatively right now, it's the title's Mob Justice.
Oh, that's right. You said that Mob Justice. So this will have Blake Hudson in it.
Probably.
Well, okay, still some decisions being made on that.
No,
But
that
I'm just,
decision's being made, but you said no spoilers. So, yeah, so we'll assume for the sake of argument that Blake Hudson makes it out of Scavenger Hunt alive. And if that were to happen, he'd probably end up in Chicago with another mission. But
I
he
see, I see. So, we don't know. It could be his son who is who's looking out for justice, or who knows what, or his wife. I mean, nowadays we have female heroes as well. So,
absolutely.
you moved. How long did it take you to write Scavenger Hunt?
It took me 18 months over 20 years to write Scavenger Hunt.
Each. And how long did it take you to write Homecoming Queen?
9 months.
9 months. So tell me the difference. I mean, this idea for a scavenger hunt, I realized this was incubating over a long time. 9 months is pretty quick to write a novel. So what did you learn writing that first one that made you so much more efficient with the second?
I mean, I want to say everything. I still have a lot to learn, but my capabilities writing Homecoming Queen were, just much more than when I'd started writing Scavenger Hunt. I'll tell you the story this way, or at least the way I think about it. When I started down the path of writing a novel, I didn't think that I would ever try to get it published, and then I had people encouraging me to get it published. And so I went down, I got an agent, and I started marching down. And the first time I went through the publishing process, I was turned down by the top four publishing houses. And that was kind of the deal. We were going to go for the top four, nothing at all. And so I put the book aside and I didn't pick it up for several more years. And again, it was people encouraging me to pick it back up. And I thought I would just do it and, go ahead and have somebody edit it and I would send it out to my 50 closest people who had helped me with the book. And then when I had it edited, the editor said, "Why isn't this published?" But along that way, I had rewritten Scavenger Hunt several times, and each time the writing quality was that much better. I mean, I think I get paid, or I used to get paid for my writing in the legal world, and you kind of learn that's your craft, and you think you're good at it. And then when you get into writing fiction, the more creative writing, it's a completely different skill. Of course, you're still writing, you still have to have right grammar, but it's a different skill. It's an art lesson. It's more of an art than the legal science of writing. And so it took me a while to learn my craft. And I don't think we ever stop learning our craft. But I always thought of getting published as being kind of a rite of passage. It was almost like acting, that you had to take your lumps, you had to work hard for five, and you do. I mean, a lot of us, it takes us a long time to get published. But I will tell you, it's not just a rite of passage, but your work quality is actually improving along the way. I go back and I look at my initial drafts of Scavenger Hunt, and they're trash. I mean, in terms of writing quality, they don't deserve to be published. And it took me a while of overcoming failure and learning how to write before I had something that was worthy of publishing. And so that's why it took me so long. I had to not only, well, I had four kids and I changed job multiple times, and I was still in my formative years, like, of my legal career. So I had a day job, and so I couldn't dedicate full time to it. But a lot of it was just learning how to write. And I think when I took on Homecoming Queen, I was very confident in, whether I should have been or not. I was very confident that I knew what I was doing. I'd already been approved by, the audiences that I needed to be approved by for my confidence level to keep me going. So that's
How
what happened.
how did your writing get better? Now, writing, people do say, when you write and you write consistently, your writing will get better. But were there other things that made your writing better?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about, you learn from others. I think that's part of it. When you write a story, you're just writing a story, and then you go back and you edit it, and then you edit it again. If you're really good, you're going to edit it over and over and over again. At some point, you got to let it go. But for me, I mean, it took me a while to, even though I read a lot of books, I never really paid attention through the lens of a writer. It was always through the lens of a reader when I was doing that, and you learn some of that. Um, by osmosis. But when until you really have to put something on paper and turn it over to a professional, you don't really focus on the craft as much. And I wasn't as focused on the craft when I got started. I was focused on the story, and you have to have both. And so when you think about a lawyer, the way a lawyer writes, we like to use words like moreover and therefore, and we try to be very concise, but it doesn't often read well in terms of storytelling. And so you have to learn how to become a storyteller and how to write that way. For me, I mean, I'll just give you an example. How do you become a better writer? How does it improve? Well, read On Writing by Stephen King. He tells you to take out all your adverbs. When I finished Scavenger Hunt, I went back, I think it was like 105,000 words, and I took out most of the adverbs, and I got under 100,000 words. I had adverbs everywhere, and they made the
Yeah.
story, messy.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the arguments is if you're using adverbs, it's because you don't have a strong or accurate enough verb. So you're trying to augment it. But
That's right.
it's just a typical thing that a new writer does. They tend to overwrite. Um, so tell us about Homecoming Queen. What's the sketch on that one? Again, avoiding the spoilers.
Yeah, so Homecoming Queen, when we talk about female protagonists, we have a very strong one in Homecoming Queen. Annika Raven is her name. She's a young woman who was homecoming queen of her high school in South Texas, who left town for whatever reason and came back a few years later to rescue her little sister from a neglectful situation within the family. And she's having a really hard time getting out of town. There's a category, once in a lifetime Category 5 hurricane that's barreling in the Gulf Coast towards Miranda, Texas, and then a very corrupt political mayor there, along with some other apparatchiks that are refusing to let her leave. And so the struggle continues, and she has to get out of town before it's too late.
Now, what is the tagline here? I read it earlier. No one ever leaves Miranda twice. So she comes back to Miranda correct? And can't
Right.
basically can't find her way out.
Exactly right, for a variety of reasons, and you have in Homecoming Queen, you kind of have a town that kind of takes on a life of its own. It's filled with people who are losing young talent, a lot like my hometown of Corpus Christi back in the day, and becomes jealous of sorts of people who, particularly when the talent leaves. And so there are people that are intent on keeping her in town once she returns back and not looking after her interests for sure.
So Texas is a setting for Homecoming Queen. Scavenger Hunt is it set in DC or is it set in Texas?
In DC.
In DC, okay. Now you're from Texas originally, Chad?
I am. I'm from Corpus Christi, Texas.
Corpus Christi. Are you an American first or a Texan first?
I'm an American first and a Texan very close second.
You know why I asked that question.
Well,
Um,
I'm going to make sure that I keep my security clearance.
I've just never seen a state where people identify so strongly with their state. And
Well,
um,
and
and I've asked a few different Texans that question. That's one I remember one woman in the financial services industry said, "Whoa, what a question." And it took her a little while to answer. And she said, "Well, I'm very much a Texan. I love Texas, but I'm also an American." And and then we had the whole thing where for a while they're saying, "Well, Texas has the right to secede from the Union. It's written into our, the annexation agreement or whatever it's called." So it's interesting how Texas is really a state set apart in a lot of ways in terms of that mentality. I've spent time in Texas. I've had Iron City beer and went to college for one semester there before transferring to Arizona State University and so on. Booming state, obviously. And you're living in Austin these days, or wait, are you in Austin?
I'm in Virginia these days.
You're in
Yeah.
Virginia. Okay. Gotcha. So, all right. So there's Homecoming Queen. You wrote that one in 9 months. Your third one is basically done and going through final, some final massaging and
Yep.
marketing considerations. How long did that one take you to write?
9 months.
9 months. Okay. So do you feel pretty much like that um, can be the cycle that you'll be able to kick out a book a year?
I hope so. Again, it's kind of depends on what's going on at work, but if things are just really busy at work, I think 9 months is the cadence there. I will tell you with Homecoming, when you mentioned Texas, the intrigue around that book is particularly those that are not, well, people from Texas will love the book, I hope. Um, Corpus Christi is a special place. Miranda is kind of my made up name for a South Texas town that has looks a lot like Corpus Christi. But Texas, the intrigue there of why that culture is what it is largely baked into my book. And so those that are not from Texas will get a good sense of why we share some of those views. And and I think that it's pretty open and obvious once you see the characters and how they respond to things. One of the phenomena that we have there is people in South Texas don't like to leave for hurricanes. And we measure time by hurricanes on the Gulf Coast there. I know people in Mississippi coast and Alabama do some of that as well. But my grandfather who raised me, you know, he would have a hurricane tracking chart and he would measure time. He would say that I was born, a year after Hurricane Celia. That's the way he thought about it.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it's embedded in the culture there, and
Why
part
won't
of
they leave though?
well, so it used to be that we would leave all the time. There was a hurricane called Hurricane Celia that devastated the Gulf Coast there, and then there were a series of hurricane threats, that would come, and everybody would leave. And if you said you went to school in Texas, so you know that the main artery moving, south to north or north to south too, is I-35. And you would go from Corpus Christi to San Antonio on I-37, then you get on I-35 and you'd go from Austin to Waco to Temple to Waco and then to Dallas, and you would just sit in traffic, and then there would always be kind of like a ho hum. There was this Hurricane Allen wasn't that big of a deal. Hurricane name your name wasn't that big of a deal. Then all of a sudden it's like, we don't leave anymore. We got our generators. We're going to stay. And, eventually after Hurricane Katrina and you had Rita, Wilma, those other hurricanes that came in people started to rethink that. But yeah, there's a stubbornness to it. And it's a big, big part of the book.
Yeah.
Another thing that I found out with respect to hurricanes as it relates to Homecoming Queen is almost all of the bad hurricanes occur during presidential administrations when there's a Republican in office.
Well, I do remember when uh, George W. Bush was in office in the which one was that? New Orleans was
Katrina.
Katrina, and that just was a disaster. I mean, disaster also because just logistically for the federal government and so on. Yeah, it's and we're getting more and more of these, it seems. So, talk about what characteristic do you possess, Chad, that obviously you have a lot of characteristics that feed into your writing that make you successful at what you're doing, but what characteristic would you say chief among them is one that you find indispensable, that you feel like that I need of the characteristics I have or the skills I have, that one is the one that's really a linchpin for me, the one that I really couldn't do without.
I don't give up, I think is I have a persistence that was given to me by my mother. My mom had me when she was 19. And my dad didn't stick around very long after that. And so she raised me as a single mom, and we were as poor as it gets. And I remember I actually put this in my scavenger hunt. I dedicated that book to her. I've since lost my mom, but and so she never got to read Scavenger Hunt. But I dedicated that book to her. And in the opening, I talk about how she held me on that couch in that dumpy apartment that we were about to lose. And she had her mascara, dripping down her face and onto me. And she was saying, "We are going to make it, son. We are going to make it."
Hmm.
And that her point was never give up. Nobody's ever going to give you anything. And that drive that I got from that has been kind of a catalyst for at least my professional career, and it definitely is something that I see now in my books. I don't take no for an answer, and I keep working until I will get to where I need to be. And that discipline that comes with that is, at least for me, indispensable as it relates to me writing a book and finishing the book.
What about a turning point in your writing life? Was there a turning point? Was there a time when something happened, you learned something, somebody gave you an assist of some kind, whatever it might be, that just accelerated everything for you or got you into the channel?
Yeah, there were really three, I think, meaningful points for me in the career. The first was I have a good friend of mine who I started at DOJ with. He was born in Colombia, but he he calls Austin his home. And he flighted up to DOJ with me at about the same time, and is about my age. And he was one of the few that I trusted with earlier draft of Scavenger Hunt. And it was one of those where you kind of hand it over and you close your eyes, like, is it going to be good enough kind of thing. And I remember he sent me a note, and the note said, and again, I've noted this in Scavenger Hunt in the acknowledgments. The note said, "See it through." And then every time I saw him, like, he would say, "See it through." And so that was a great encouragement to me from somebody that I thought a lot about. And then I got an agent at some point, and good agents don't take you on unless they think your book is worthy of being published. So that was kind of a confidence builder for me. And then eventually, when I picked my book back up, and I had an editor read it and then said, "Why isn't this published?" And she became a champion for my books. And for all three of those reasons, it took all three of those probably to get it done.
Wow. Um, what author inspires you the most? Is there a author you've read his or her entire body of work? Not even necessarily the entire body of work, but an author who really inspires you and you feel like has emboldened your own work.
Yeah, so for me, Robert Ludlum was somebody that I couldn't put down.
Mm.
Robert Ludlum was a writer of spy thrillers, and just the richness of it and the content of his writing was something that, one of these days I hope I can be as good as. It was funny because, you ask the question and now I can say that and I can believe that. It may not be true, but we kind of know it's true because we have AI now. And so when I turned my manuscript over on Scavenger Hunt to the publisher, they ran AI on it. And one of the things that they can tell, and you probably know this, and maybe your readers do too. I didn't know this. They can tell what writers you're most closely aligned with in terms of your writing style. And for me, it was Robert Ludlum. And so when they told me that,
Wow.
actually, it was one of the writers that mimic Robert Ludlum. So it was kind of a somebody who tries to be like Robert Ludlum that actually wasn't Robert Ludlum. But it didn't surprise me to hear that. I was surprised to learn that that was available in terms of analytics. It was not a surprise to know that that's who I mimicked the most.
So Jason Bourne and the Bourne Conspiracy and
Yeah.
the Bourne this and the Bourne that, a whole series of movies. Is there any talk? Has your agent been working the streaming channel circuit, the Hollywood circuit, trying seeing about maybe getting Scavenger Hunt? Well, either one of your novels made into a something for the silver screen or for Netflix.
Yes, and I actually spent some time in Hollywood over the summer, and I've got some contacts there that are definitely interested. One of whom worked with me at DOJ. Is now a big producer in Hollywood, but the talk is definitely of a series, more so than a movie as it relates to Scavenger Hunt. So I am excited about that, and we're in the works. We'll see how that works out. But definitely on my mind.
So it's not a deal yet, but it's a deal possibly in formation.
Correct.
Hmm. Now tell me why you write, Chad. I mean, it's an exacting process. It's frustrating a lot of the time. I know that if I have a bad day of writing, I have a bad day, generally. Um, and I have bad days if I don't write. It's like, I always tell my wife, I'm in a bad mood. Just ask me if I've written that day. Um, what do you get out of it on the positive side? What are the mental, emotional rewards of writing for you?
So, Mike, I think I'm the complete opposite of you. If I have a bad day writing, I have a good day. As long as I've written, I feel like I've gotten something done. I have a bad day when I watch TV and I don't even try to write.
Hmm.
I feel like that's a worthless day for me. I try to be productive. I'm not saying that, I like to watch TV as much as anybody. I particularly like to watch sports, but if I don't get anything on the page, I tend to be a little, it's almost like I haven't exercised. I feel like
Hmm.
I didn't get something done that I needed to. But I enjoy being a part of a parallel universe. I don't, I don't, I say that kind of tongue in cheek but I like I like my job. I'll put it to you this way. I have an amazing job and I work with amazing people, but a lot of stuff we do as lawyers is hard and it's kind of the dark underbelly of society. We deal with a lot of bad stuff all the time and it can weigh on you a little bit. It can be psychologically challenging if that's all you're doing. And so I'm not into escapism, but this is a way for me to kind of be a part of, again, like a parallel universe where I get to be in charge for a little bit and my characters can take form and I can come up with a story that I really believe in and that people really like. And then when I finish the product, and I throw it over the transom, if you will. And there is kind of that hold your breath. I hope my wife likes it. I hope so and so likes it. I hope my editor likes it. And then the reward you get from when it's finished and it's good is so good. It is so worth it. And yeah, you're going to have up days, you're going to have bad days, you're going to have characters that your editor may not think or should be in the book. There'll be all those things that take your heart and kind of throw it on the ground and stomp on it. But in the end, it's worth it. You have to have you have to have thick skin in this business. Believe me, in the legal world, we do things called murder boards. Like, and murder board is, you're standing up before you go to trial, and people are just being as harsh as they can because, believe me, judges are very harsh. And you'd rather hear it from your friends before you hear it from your judge in front of your client. And so we have to have thick skin in that world, but it's nothing like having the thick skin you have to have in the artistic world. Because not only do you have to get past the experts in whatever industry you're working in, for me, it's largely law enforcement, intel, Homeland Security, but then the publishing world and the marketing world, some of those people, well-spirited, well-meaning, they can be ruthless, and they get to the point very quickly, and that can hurt.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned sports. Let's say you do write, you have a good day of writing, and then well, good or bad doesn't make a difference. You sat down, you did the work. Now you're going to reward yourself with some sports. What is your sport of? I mean, you're from Texas. I know football's religion in Texas. Is it football, or do you have like other sports as well?
I like most sports. I will tell you that I spend most of my time with baseball, football, and basketball. If you're asking me where my allegiances lie, I'm going to confuse some people because yes, I'm a Cowboys fan. You can probably understand. I mean, it's hard to be a Cowboys fan. I have to tell you, it used to
Hmm.
be. It's very hard now. But I went to Baylor University. I'm a huge Baylor fan. Basketball, I love Scott Drew. He's my favorite coach of all. He took us from the doldrums to the highest prize in the national championship. So
Hmm.
I love my coach Drew. But I'm also a huge Yankees fan. And a lot of
That was
people,
a disappointment this year, wasn't it? The Yankees, it's that fifth inning, they just fell apart in the series against the Dodgers.
yeah. So I do live in Virginia, but I do make it up to some Yankees games. I took my youngest child he's 13 to Game 4 of the World Series, and if you were watching in the first inning when Otani was up and the bleacher creatures were doing roll call, my son Hudson and he's actually named after Blake Hudson.
Mm.
Uh, Hudson and I were sitting right next to the guy who does roll call. So we were on TV. We're on national television twice, doing roll call with the Yankees. Jim Leyritz, who's a big hero for the Yankees, was up there with us, and it was an amazing night. Of course, that was the one game where the Yankees pulled it out. So um, sorry for those Dodgers fans listening, but yeah, huge Yankees fan. But a good series with
Yeah,
the Dodgers.
yeah. So you went to we were in Waco, Texas then.
Oh yeah.
Going to Baylor. I love that championship, when they won the March Madness. I love that team, the guards on that team and just the whole team. It was great. I actually went to Waco. My wife's a huge fan of Chip and Joanna Gaines, and we did the tour and we went through the campus and all that. Were you were not were you in Waco when
Branch
the Branch
Davidian.
Davidian compound? I know that it wasn't in Waco proper. It was in Elm. Is that right? Elm, Texas was where it
So
was.
yeah, so it's almost like if you're whatever city you're in, the suburb right outside of the city is where the compound was. Yes, I was there. 19, I think it was 1995, and I was in my senior year of college there, and was dating my now wife. We met at Baylor, and I was water skiing. I was water skiing in a lake with some friends when the helicopters started flying over the first time. And if you can imagine, Texas has a lot of ranches, and so there's kind of a ranch community that abuts, Waco, where people may have, let's just say, like 100 acres of ranch land. They may have a house on it, they may not. And I had some fraternity brothers that actually had a ranch that was not adjacent to the Branch Davidian complex, but one removed. And so we were always trying. Of course, we were crazy back then. We were always trying to break in and figure out. So I had a couple of encounters with DEA agents and ATF agents and FBI agents before I ever worked for all those law enforcement communities at
Wow.
DOJ. Um, we never got into trouble, but they were kind to us. They knew we were a bunch of punks. But yeah, it was right there. And then we all watched. A lot of us, my wife and I, both watched. The complex burn from the business building there at Baylor. Saw the smoke and the fire, and it's a very terrible episode in Texas history for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So getting back to writing, final question. How do you expect your writing will change with age, Chad? I know that's not an easy question to answer, but you've seen how your writing has evolved so far. I mean, largely it sounds like what happened is you've just become a much better writer. But as we age, our perspective changes sometimes. Do you have any sense of how your writing will change over the next 20 or 30 years?
I hope my style just improves. I hope, obviously, I hope my writing quality improves on the margins at least. But what I really hope to have is a catalog of books. Think Vince Flynn or the Bourne series or Jack Ryan with Clancy, and then I do borrow a lot from other genres and just in the kind of way that I think about things. So one of the things that I really loved about the Gunslinger series from Stephen King is that you would find characters from other books, including his horror books, that would make it into that story. And I think that you're probably going to see a lot more of that intertwined with my Scavenger Hunt series, if I am, given the opportunity to continue to do this. I love writing. I hope to have an audience that sticks with me and something that I can continue to do in retirement and just create a catalog of great stories that all have a fabric that kind of intertwines within them all.
Well, Chad, you're a young guy. You've already lived a fascinating life and you're really just getting going. Thank you very much for coming on the program.
It was my honor. It was great to be a part of this. Thank you so much.